Hello there and welcome to this week's oil painting demonstration, and in this week's video I'm going to be guiding you through the development involved in creating this oil painting using just 4 colors. So I'll be using zinc white, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, and ivory black. And in this week's video we're going to employ a very bold tactic. We're going to be painting with a brave brush approach, just going right in there and trying to get the effect of light and understanding our color harmonies using just those 4 colors. So let's get to the painting video. And here's our model, Lauren, and I'm going to keep an image of her to the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as the painting develops. Alright, I'm going to start off by listing the colors that I'll be using for this video. This is also what you saw last time. This is the Zorn palette. So essentially it is a white, a red, a yellow, and a black, but more specifically we have zinc white, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, and ivory black, and we're working on a regular cotton canvas that was toned with burnt umber oil paint about a couple weeks ago. So that's dry. Alright, so I'm going to start off with a size 6 Master's Touch filbert bristle brush, but it's actually a pretty much a size 2 filbert bristle brush. It's actually a bristle synthetic mix. I just like to use a kind of a medium-sized filbert brush as a drawing brush, and I'm mixing up a drawing color. And so I'm mixing up a little bit of ivory black and cadmium red medium, about in equal parts. And I'm going to use a tiny bit of odorless mineral spirits. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit of mineral spirits on my brush and a very tiny bit of mineral spirits. I don't want too much. So let's go ahead and just mix up a little bit more. So this is going to be very similar to a burnt umber drawing color, actually. So it's amazing how many different colors you can get with the Zorn palette, and I really enjoyed using the Zorn palette last week, so I thought I would use it again for this week's video. So just a little more mineral spirits, and now this mixture is alright. Alright, so I'm going to look for the placement. So the first thing is to get an idea of the placement, and so that's probably going to be the top of the head, maybe a little bit further down. Let's say to about there. And let's use a little bit more mineral spirits just to get the paint to flow. Again, don't want to use too much of that. Alright, so let's suppose the bottom is right here. So top and bottom. And this is just to get an idea of the placement of the head. So here's the side. And I'm trying to let the brush roam free. So let's title this kind of like a brave brush type of movement. There's a lot of tension in portrait painting, especially when you're just getting started on a portrait, whether you're doing a transfer drawing or you're working directly like I'm doing with this one. So it's important to get rid of that tension quite early on. So again, we're just making very bold marks. So here's the shoulder. Shoulder is going to fall about there. And I'm going to sit back and see if that's where I want it to be. And we're working in the abstract. And in the beginning, I want to think about it as an abstract process. So I'm just looking at shape. I'm not really thinking about that I'm painting a image of a human being or anything like that. I'm just thinking about the abstract quality of the shapes. So let's look at these negative shapes here. So the back of the head, I'd say I want the back of the head to come to about there. So I want about this much distance. So I might have to move the side of the face maybe to about here. So just a little adjustment there to move the side of the face. And the shape of the hair comes to about there. Let's say this comes down to here. The hair comes to about there. And I'm just trying to get a feel for the pose. Think about drawing the pose and not the model, especially in the early stages. So again, just mixing up the cadmium red medium with the ivory black and just trying to get a nice little consistency for my drawing color. Just a little bit more cadmium red medium. So about that, that's fine. So let's see, let's make some indications for where the hair is going to fall. Just simple straight lines and angles for that. So the hair is going to go roughly about there. Let's say this shape goes here. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of where I want the head to fit. It's all about the placement right now. I can always build the accuracy on top of this. And this is also known as direct painting. Direct painting, where you work directly onto your canvas. All right, let's make a little envelope shape here. Let's see, so the envelope is somewhat like this. The shape comes out to about there. Looking at the big angles here. So again, back to the cadmium red, ivory black. Just trying to get the big general proportions. Comes to about there. I'm going to use a vertical line. So this goes about here. A little bit more medium. So that is just a little more mineral spirits. And I'm thinking about this as basically a drawing. I'm not worried about the painterly effects or anything like that just yet. I'm just thinking about it as a drawing. Let's see, so let's mass in a little dark here. Just a little dark shape there. Let's look at the side of the shoulder there. Goes to about there. So now I think I'm pretty confident on the placement of the head. So now let's get into some of the features of the head, why not? So again, we're remixing our drawing color. So that's just the cadmium red and the ivory black. Very simple little combination there. All right, so let's see. So let's suppose that the top of the hairline is here. So top of the hairline is there. So that makes the top of the hair come to about there. So I'm going to use a little piece of paper towel with a tiny bit of odorless mineral spirits. Keyword tiny, tiny bit of mineral spirits. And let's just get a more exacting outside shape now. So let's go ahead and just add a little more of our drawing color there. So right now I just want to get the top of the head, the top of the hairline established and build these shapes so that I can construct the features based on the outside shape. So we're working outside in. And the idea of the brave brush, we're going to employ this throughout the entire painting. And you just got to get in there. You just got to jump in there and make a mark. And if it's not right, change it. And that's it. So there's to it. So again, let's look at let's remix this drawing color. So I'll tell you what. Maybe next time I'll add burnt umber to the palette, just so I can have this drawing color ready. Alright, so here's the side. I'm looking at these angles. I'm looking at the angles very closely, trying to get them as accurate as I can with this very little bits of information as possible. So let's see. So if this is the shape of the hair surrounding the forehead, that means that the corner of the eye socket must be somewhere around here. And I'm trying to get a feel for these shapes. Notice how I'm sitting pretty far back. So let's look at this angle here. Another angle down here for the nose. And again, let's follow the center line right here. So the center line, this line I'm drawing in right now, is the line that divides two halves of the face. So we have bilateral symmetry, right? So one side of my face is here, the other side is here. I'm trying to get that established on the portrait. And I'm trying to draw the pose, not the model. So if that is my accent for the side of the face, here's my accent for the side of the eye socket. Let's go back in with the paper towel and just get a little more specificity with these shapes. It's really important to take your time in the beginning, especially with the drawing, and know what you're after. Because I'm not after a finished outline right now. I'm using a very bold tactic, bold, brave brush tactic, just going right into the painting. And I'm trying to obtain very specific marks that can guide the rest of the brush strokes to follow on top of. So this is almost like a scaffolding. And you'll get a feel for your materials too. So again, I like using paper towel as my eraser. Sometimes you'll see me use a brush. Notice how I'm just going to even obliterate that shape that I had for the nose. It's a very back and forth-ish type of process. You make a mark down, you step back or you sit back, and then you see that it can be made a little bit better, and then you adjust it. So now let's see, the nose should fit about there. And again, the mouth somewhere here. Somewhere about there. And I'm making these decisions by eye. I'm letting my eye determine where things are going to fit roughly. And then I'm going to use something like a caliper to get these specific shapes, or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just rely just on my eye. I don't know. So here we have the side of the eye socket. So now I'm going to start to draw in a shape for the eye socket. Whereas before we had just a simple line, now we're going to have more of an accurate shape. And let's just look at this horizontal. This angle is somewhat about like this, right? And it's very tempting to look at that photograph on the corner of your screen and just say that I'm copying it. Very tempting to think that. But I'm not. I'm trying to look at the shapes, and I'm trying to reason with the shapes and make a painting. I think it's important to think about painting as a process, and a process that doesn't have to have a photographic finish. There are plenty of beautiful photographs out there. Let a photograph be a photograph, and a painting be a painting. But hey, if you're into photorealistic painting, I certainly have made some paintings that are very similar to photographs. That's all you. Do whatever makes you happy. So now we have a little simple, look at this, kind of like a triangle, isn't it? For the shape of the eye. This cuts in somewhere over there. Now notice how minimalistic these shapes are, and that's the key. So now I'll tell you what, I'm going to get a dry brush. So this is a Simply Simmons size 6 bristle flat. Pretty beat up and used up brush. And this is actually going to help me obtain even more specificity now. So I'm just using it as more of a detailed eraser. So just trying to peel out that side. And let's use it even for this shape here. The side of the jaw. So here's a little chin, mandible. Ramus of the jaw goes in somewhere about in here. Now after sitting back, I noticed that the top of the head still might be a little too high. So let's go ahead and cut this back. So let's cut this back. So this cuts in a little bit like this. Just cuts down here. Something like that. Now this cuts in over here. Notice how I'm kind of working the shapes all around, really. This cuts in here. Switch to the dry brush and just use it to get a fine edge there. Just clean off the brush on the palette, or sorry, on the canvas. Now switching back to this brush, see that the angle of the mouth is probably coming out to about something like this. Now then, the nose comes out just a little more. So at this point, I'm actually going to switch to my size 4 Blick Master Stroke bristle brushes. And these are some size 4 filbert bristle brushes. And I'm going to use these brushes now to mix up just a simple flesh tone. And I'm going to use this flesh tone to draw with. So my first flesh tone mixture is just cadmium red with the yellow ochre. And the zinc white is now going to raise the value. And I'm going to use a little bit of my drawing color down here just to neutralize that color. And I tell you what, I'm not really a fan of zinc white. It's just kind of the only white or transparent white that I have on hand. I used a lead white in the past made by this brand called Rublev. And the paint just started to dry too quickly and even started drying in my tube. And I took some of your suggestions and took it out and put some linseed oil in it. But at that point, it was gone. It dried way too much. So, all right. Now this is my drawing color. So let's go ahead and now put in the side of the nose there. The side of the nose comes out to about there. Now I'm going to be making my brush strokes in a very horizontal fashion, just to cut back on glare. Just the way that my lighting is set up, the canvas tends to glare whenever I make brush strokes in any direction that's not horizontal. So I'm actually going to make this a little deeper and a little more pink. So I just added a little more of the cadmium red and ivory black just to cut back on the tone. Maybe that's too pink, so let's use some yellow ochre and take some of this mixture from the drawing. And that's a little better. So let's use this drawing brush to draw out this little corner here on the bottom. And it's alright if we go right over top of the shape for the mouth, because we're going to come back in and make that more specific later. Let's put in some lighter planes here. So I'm going to use the word plane a lot. So a plane is just a three-dimensional construct of a flat surface in space. So essentially, my canvas is a plane. The palette is a plane. And all of that is in relation to the light source. Let's cut that back. So let's see. The forehead comes out to about there. Just filling in this little drawing color. And let's even put some of that drawing color into here. So now I'm going to start to put in some little accents. Some lighter planes. So accents for the lighter planes. So I'm using more of the zinc white and the yellow ochre. And let's see if this combination is good. Let's actually make it more pink. So a little bit more cadmium red. There we go. Little indication of light there. And let's follow through to the other side of the eye socket. There you go. A little accent. Just simple accent marks. And let's make it even more pink. Even more pink and even darker. Notice how I'm moving down on the palette to make it darker. So there you go. Another accent there. Very simple. And each value change is an indication of a plane change. Now let's go ahead and let's see. A little bit more pink. So I am obtaining my pinkish colors by, again, just using my cadmium red medium with the colors that are already on my palette. So let's make this a little deeper, more pink around the cheek. Just flat shape for now. Very simple. And I tell you what, the top of the forehead around here is actually a little darker, more of a rosy-ish, rose-ish type of color. So let's actually use a little more yellow ochre than cadmium red. Let's add some of this mixture down here. Let's just take some of this mixture. Nope, needs a little more of this color. A little more of the cadmium red medium and the ivory black. There you go. And there you have it. Very simple little plane change there. As it starts to turn into the hair. And now I'm going to make it a little lighter. Not that much lighter. But I'm going to start to add another plane right here. So that plane is the basically the bottom side of the zygomatic bone, so the cheekbone. Remember, zygomatic is just a fancy way of saying the cheekbone. Let's cut that back in there. Very simple. And now let's follow through to the other side, and with a little more cadmium red, so a little more pink, and a little lighter in value, we're going to add another plane change. See, look at that. When I apply the brush stroke in a direction that's not horizontal, a glare happens. So let's get rid of that glare. Might need to get a little darker. So let's start to create a value scale on the palette. So these flesh tones are getting darker as I'm moving down on the palette. So that's going darker. Very simple. Now, I see that it's actually getting lighter here because this is the cheekbone turning down, and then as we approach the mandible, it gets lighter here. But it's very subtle. Very slight little value change, and I may not get it first try. It may take a couple tries to get it, but let's go ahead and try to get it. A little lighter there. And now down here, it's a little darker and a little, I'd say more in the yellow greenish side. So let's go further down the value scale on the palette. So the yellow ochre, a little more yellow ochre, and ivory black gives us closer to a greenish flesh tone. And there you have it. There's that plane. Now I'm going to take the brush. Notice that I went greenish. So I'm actually going to clean the brush off with mineral spirits. Odorless mineral spirits. And just trying to dry it off on the paper towel until there's barely any mineral spirits on it. Now let's go back up here. Add a little more yellow ochre. And paint in this flesh tone. Let's add some more cadmium red, ivory black. Back to the yellow ochre. That's about it for that value. Now let's go ahead, switch brushes, and mix up something for this, for the hair. Start off with the cadmium red and the burnt umber. Sorry, burnt umber. I'm so used to having burnt umber in my palette. Just ivory black and cadmium red medium. And again, these colors are very similar to a burnt umber. And now I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my medium. My painting medium is Neo-Megilp, so it's a gel-like medium. So I have my medium in this little cup here, and I just dip it into the gel like that. Pat it dry a little bit on the paper towel, and then notice how it just flows a little better. Now I don't want to use too much medium, so there's a little key. Little thing to keep in mind is not to overuse medium. Use it when you need to thin out the paint. And pretty much just for that. Until you get to other stages like glazing or something. But we're not going to do that with this one. With this one, we're painting directly. So I'm just filling in a dark mass. Just a simple dark mass for the hair. Cuts down to about here. Very simple. So now I'm going to, let's say, a little more yellow ochre. So let's just go ahead and just mix with some of these flesh tones. The yellow ochre. So yellow ochre, cadmium red. Notice how it's kind of a greenish, a warm greenish. So let's let that go down here. And that's just a simple shape for now. Simple shape for now. We'll come back to it later and make it much more specific. Now let's switch brushes again. So I'm going to switch to a brush that I'll use for the background. So we're going to use ivory black, cadmium red, A little bit more ivory black than cadmium red. Just a little more ivory black than cadmium red. No medium. Start to put in this background. Now I don't want it to be completely black. So that's why I'm using some of the cadmium red medium. And again, a little more cadmium, or sorry, a little more ivory black than cadmium red. Now let's just block in this background color. And again, I have to paint in this direction. I have to apply brush strokes in this direction to minimize the glare. This cuts back here. Alright, so now we've established our we've established the main masses. Now remember, a mass is just a large area of color and value. So we've just established large masses, and now we're going to go into the smaller shapes for the portrait. So let's give you a little close-up shot here as we build these smaller shapes. Alright, so now we're going to start to subdivide our larger shapes into smaller shapes. And that it's at this point where our knowledge of structure and anatomy is going to be kind of useful. So don't worry, I'll guide you through my thought process as I apply these shapes. So now I'm looking at the concavity of the eye socket. I'm throwing some anatomical terms at you, not very complex, but still somewhat rooted in anatomy. So this area right here is going to get darker. Notice how it's darker on the photo reference. And it's darker because it's a plane change that's turning away from the light. So again, we're thinking about anatomy and we're thinking about planes. So we're thinking of the structure of this, and we're also thinking of the anatomical significance behind this structural change. So that's going to get darker, but it's not going to get that dark because it's actually not in shadow. It's just a very dark halftone. Pretty much the only shadow is going to be on the bottom of the chin, really, and the bottom of the nose. So now we're going to follow through, and the bottom side, right about here. So here we have the bottom of the lower eyelid. So that's going to obtain a kind of pinkish tone. So I'm using cadmium red mixed into my lighter flesh tones on the palette. And again, my flesh tones aren't going to be that complicated, just using the same types of combinations that I introduced in the earlier segments of this video. Just painting in the little shape for the side of the eye socket. And it's going to get darker here on the other side of the eye socket, so directly across the concavity of the eye. That's how we're building the shape of the eye socket. And we're going to add the eye into the shape of the eye socket. How about that? It's like constructing a house, really. You're thinking about the large structures before you get too caught up with the smaller structures. So again, this is going to be a lighter plane here. A little bit lighter here. And you know why it's lighter. Because the plane is facing the light a little bit more. Very simple little shape there. And now, with the dry brush, I'm just going to kind of blend this drawing color in to make the shape of the, or make the value for the eyebrows. And now a lighter plane right there. Now I'm going to switch brushes to some even smaller brushes. So I'm going to be using some size 0 round brushes to construct the eye. So with just a simple combination of ivory black and cadmium red mixed onto a little bit of our yellow ochre. I'm just trying to get a little shape here for the eye. The top of the eyelid comes out to about there. And I tell you what, as I do that, I'm going to compare it to the other eye. And let's use a little horizontal. I'd say it comes out to about there. Not entirely sure. So let's see. It comes out to about here. And now, for the white of the eye, I'm pretty much just going to use Ivory black and our Zinc white. And the white of the eye, also known as the sclera, is not white. Remember, it's kind of like a halftone usually. So I tell you what, I put in a little bit of the flesh tone into that mixture, but I'm trying to remain on the cool side. Certainly don't want it to be pink. So here we have our little shape. Simple little shape there for the sclera of the eye. Now, after sitting back, I noticed that this eye might be too far down, or the eyebrow might be too high up. And I think it's the eye, so tell you what, we're just going to make this shape a little bit bigger. No one has to know. We're making this a little bigger now. And we're going to switch back to the drawing color, basically. And just move it up. And man, that could take several tries, really. And this is a perfect example of why I usually say in my videos, keep your shapes simple and easy for you to understand. So when the time comes to make any changes, or if the time comes where you need to make any changes, those changes are simple and easy to understand. And I will add, those changes are simple and easy to manage. So let's see, I'm actually going to mix a little bit of, I'm going to take a little bit of flesh tone, kind of a darker flesh tone, paint that in right there. And I'm trying to put just enough information for the eyes right now so that it reads at a distance. That's really what I'm after. Now, watch what happens when I put in a little touch there for the highlight. So I'm just using the white mixed with ivory black, a little bit of ivory black. Not sure if that's in the right spot, but the magic starts to happen once you start to add more and more values. But you want the magic to happen at the right place. So let's go ahead and use some ivory black and our white. So what I mean by that is that it only takes a few values to get something to read very well at a distance. But wouldn't you want it to read well at a distance with the correct shapes? So that's why I'm trying to spend as much time as I can just observing before I make any large changes. So I'm going to use a little more ivory black into that mixture. Probably even a little bit more. And with that, we have the pupil of the eye. Now, after placing that in there, I see that the highlight that I placed earlier is in fact in the wrong place. No problem. Let's just take it out. Let's just reevaluate this shape. Now let's go back to the light for the highlight. You really want some nice tiny little brushes for this. All right, now let's look at the other side. So again, just putting enough information that this reads at a distance. And then we can subdivide it even further. So we have our little shape there for the sclera. Now with the Ivory black and the zinc white, let's go ahead and mix up some color for the iris. Very simple little touches there for the iris. And we're very much brave brushing it, even with the tiny little brushes. There shouldn't be any fear. Don't worry. It's just paint. It's not going to hurt you. Let's make it even darker. So I'm using the cadmium red with the ivory black again. Just getting this little accent. Very simple little accent mark there. Now let's look at the nose. So let's use that same color that we used there. And let's look at the nostril. Dark of the nostril right there. And let's switch to the switch back to the little round brush I was using before. So I'm going to use a little bit of cadmium red and ivory black, kind of in the middle tone region of the palette. And again, the flesh tones are no more complicated than what you saw previously. Painting in a little dark light for the side of the nose. Very simple little accent mark there. And with a different brush, let's mix up a little more of the cadmium red with the zinc white and a little tiny touch of the yellow ochre. Let's paint in this little light here. And now just kind of mixing right onto the middle tone region of the palette. We're just going to get these darker, deeper reds. It's actually even a little darker than that, so let's make it darker. And I'm trying to keep these shapes simple because there's no way I'm going to get them correct the first attempt. So I have to know that sometimes just got to go back in there and make little tiny corrections. And here we have the other side of the face turning right about there. Simple little light plane for that. Now with a little bit of cadmium red and ivory black. A little more cadmium red than ivory black. You guessed it. And the lips. Just a little simple shape there for the lips. Starting off with kind of a half tone. And I'm going to add more cadmium red and a little more of the zinc white. Alright, so here we have our dark red. Let's make it a little darker. Our bright red, but not cadmium red. I'm mixing it with the flesh tones on the palette to neutralize it, but I still want it to be kind of pink, so I'll be mindful of that color. And then there you have it, the bottom of the lip. And then let's go and paint in a little dark accent. So cadmium red, ivory black, dark accent right about there. Let's make a little vertical gesture. This does come to about there. So a little accent here. Add a little more red right about here. Let's go back to the flesh tones. So I'm going to use a little half tone closer to the greenish side. meaning I'm using more yellow ochre mixed with ivory black. Just paint in this little shape right there. And that's the bottom of the lower lip. And now we're going to look at the side. This little corner here on the side. So this whole structure here is for the orbicularis oris, and it's the little muscle shape around the mouth that encompasses the mouth. So a little shape right there. So light plane here, dark plane here, and then some halftones here gives us the volume of the orbicularis oris. It's very simple little brush strokes. And let's even throw in some light right about there. Why not? Simple little touches of light. Got to make sure that those are diagonal brush strokes. If I don't apply diagonal brush strokes, you know what'll happen. So that light right there. And after painting that in there, I see that there's another highlight that I want to place right there, right around the nasal bone actually. So here's a nice little anatomical thing to look at. So here's the highlight of the nasal bone. The nasal bone usually actually sits a little higher up than the tear ducts. See that? Nasal bone a little higher up. Now back into the flesh tones. Let's get into the middle tone region of the palette. Nothing more complicated than you saw before. And now let's go ahead and paint in some more of the smaller shapes surrounding the face. So this actually comes out to about here. Very simple. I tell you what, let's take some of the color from the sclera actually. I'm taking some from the sclera. And there's actually a little bit of light right about here. Very little. Now let's go and paint in a little high lit region. So top plane for the zygomatic bone. So here's a little top plane for the zygomatic bone. Notice how it's starting to create some more structure. Now I'm going in a darker region of the palette and just kind of build this shape right about here. Let's add a little more warmth. So my past few paintings have been kind of lacking a little warmth, so I'm going to try and punch up the warmth with this one. Very simple. Just add more warm colors, and then you have more warmth. Alright, so let's cut in this little plane here. So again, I'm going to mix up a half tone, just a red, yellow ochre mixed onto my flesh tones. Comes out to about there. Very simple and easy to work with. And still at this point, we're brave brushing it. Brave brushing it. So not afraid. See, the purpose of brave brushing is so that you're not afraid to apply the brush stroke. It's just paint. It's not going to hurt you. A little more light there. Let's add a little bit more cadmium red. A little more cadmium red, but I don't want to make it too red. You know what happens if the nose looks too red. Someone's going to tell you, why are you painting Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer? Well, I just like using cadmium red. That's why. Let's just add a little more red to that. And it's actually darker around here because the planes are turning closer towards the wing of the nose. There we go, something like that. And with a little more of the white and yellow ochre, here we have a little highlight for the nose. Now let's look at the, let's call it the band-aid area of the nose. Basically the side plane of the nose. So if you'd have a band-aid on your nose, it would go right about here. Picture that. Try to picture something resting on top of this structure to give you more of a three-dimensional sense of this image. So the band-aid would come down here and receive a little less light. Alright, so let's fill in the rest of the background. So I'm going to use again, the ivory black and a tiny bit of our cadmium red. So let's just fill in the rest of this. Now let's mix a little dark, kind of dark brownish color for the clothing. So again, the same kind of mixture, but this time I'm going to use a little more of the cadmium red medium. So again, just cadmium red medium and ivory black. Gonna apply a little bit of my medium, the Neo-Megilp. Very simple. Now that's probably too warm, so let's throw in a little bit more ivory black, some yellow ochre, a little bit more yellow ochre. Alright, next I'm going to look for the colors for the hair. So I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre. So let's tell you what, I'm going to get my palette knife. I'm going to mix the cadmium red with the ivory black. So just cadmium red and ivory black with the palette knife. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the yellow ochre and just mix right into this. Notice how I'm just pulling out the paint. So let's get some little striations of hair. So I'm letting the brush do the work for the texture of the hair for me. Very much brave brushing it. Very fearless. Let's add a little bit more cadmium red. A little bit more warmth here. And just let that light come all the way down here. And this actually kind of overlaps a little more than I had it over there. Again, let's take in that yellow ochre, push the bristles right up, just kind of scooping the paint there. And there you have it. That's how we are making the shape for the hair, or the strands of the hair. Again, brave brushing it. We're not afraid to apply these brush strokes. Simple little shapes there. Now let's add in a little bit more of the dark that's kind of missing there. So let's go back into the background color. Let's take some more ivory black. Just a little chop right there. Now let's get into some really tiny shapes, and let's look at this little dark light for the little crease here where the eye socket meets the upper eyelid. So let's go ahead with a little bit of our ivory black and cadmium red. Just a little touch here. Might need to be a little bit more red, so let's add a tiny bit more cadmium red into that mixture. So just a little bit more red. Now let's go in with some flesh tone. So taking directly from the halftone region of the palette. Here we have a little light shape. And again, moving back again to the dark shape, the dark color that is. Let's look at this dark value. And it's pretty much the shape for the eyelashes, but I'm not going to paint individual little strands of eyelash. Just a dark shape will do. A simple little dark shape there. And there's actually a little light playing beneath the tear duct. So I'm going to use my white and my cadmium red. White and cadmium red. Right about here. You see that? There's a little light playing directly beneath the tear duct there. Now it's really starting to take form with these very simple little plane changes. And let's use a little bit more cadmium red and just give a little touch of warmth right about here. A few little touches. Now going back to the halftone region of the palette, I'm just going to go ahead and create kind of a little pathway value. So a little turning value right here. So the shape should get a little darker there. Very simple little touches here. Now I'm going to get a darker shape. Just kind of going towards the kind of closer to that drawing color that we talked about before. This dark little accent here. Let's try to make that much more specific now. And this area on the side of the eye socket is turning away from the light, so it should, in theory, be getting darker. And with a little bit more cadmium red, we have a little bit more warmth into that region. Now let's go to the lighter flesh tones of the palette. Just take right off of it. And there's a little bit of light right here. A little bit of light just catching on the upper eyelid. Very simple little touches there. Now let's go ahead and look at the bottom of the wing of the nose. So this shape right here. So this actually has to come up a little bit. And there's actually a little bit of light catching right there. Right about there. Now I have to apply a diagonal brush stroke again, just so that doesn't glare too much. Now I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red into the middle region of the palette. There's like just a little touch here for a dark light. Now the nose itself, now we can add a more specific shape here for the bottom of the nose, or the root of the nose. So let's see, this comes, let's say, a little more flat, something like that. And this cuts back up, so we have 1, 2. Very simple. Now let's look at the connection between the bottom of the nose and the upper lip. Now the lip in this stage is very simplified, but at a distance it reads like a lip. And the glory here is that I can move this pretty much anywhere. It's just 3 or 4 brush strokes. So I'm just gonna sit back a little bit and just glance at the image and the painting just to see if the lips are in the right place. I think they are, so I'm going to get a little bit of cadmium red and the ivory black and add a little bit more form here to the side. So it's a little dark shape right about there. Very simple. Notice how we're subdividing our shapes now. And there's a little crease right here. Let's just paint that in there. Again, brave brushing it. Now let's look at the upper lip. Let's mix more cadmium red into the darker region of the palette. And just a little more cadmium red now. Tell you what, let's use even more cadmium red. This is the most pink region of the flesh tones. So that means it should use a little bit more cadmium red, right? So let's put that in here. There you go. Very simple. Now after sitting back, I see that this might have to come a little bit further out, and that's okay. Just a simple brush stroke will do that. No problem. A little bit more cadmium red, and let's just add a turning value here while we're at it. Very simple. Now I'm going to add even more cadmium red and white. More cadmium red and white. And this is about the most chromatic spot. So this is the brightest red spot right about here. Definitely want to get that red to show. And now the lower lip actually looks like it needs to come out that way. So let's go ahead and cut that in. Very simple little brush strokes here. I'll tell you what, it's really nice to go between large brushes and small brushes. Large brushes are really useful for covering a lot of surface area, but smaller brushes are very useful for having much more control over your paint application. Let's add just a little bit more of a dark shape right here. Very simple. Just kind of looking at this whole negative shape across here. And this cuts right about out here. That seems about right. Now again, with a combination of the cadmium red medium and the ivory black, we're going to paint in some more information. Not too much, but a little more information for the shapes for the hair. So here we have a darker shape back here. And very much just brave brushing it. We're going to get a larger brush. Just push down, just like that. And now we're just going to let the brush strokes just kind of meet one another. And through the application of the brush strokes, we should get a type of kind of illusion of hair. So each little strand or each little bristle of the brush should stand in for actual strands of hair at a distance. And it's really about what it looks like at a distance. If it looks like hair at a distance, then you're in a good place. Now for the lighter regions of the blonde color hair, I'm just very simply using yellow ochre, white, and a tiny bit of cadmium red medium. Very tiny little touches there. You can even see how this strand is overlapping with this strand. This is getting darker. This is pulling out a little bit. And let's make it a little warmer. Now I'm trying to abstract information or extract information from the image that I'm looking at. And I'm trying to observe the shapes in a very abstract fashion. I'm trying to look at the big patterns to see how this gets darker here and then much darker out here. I'm more interested in the structure of the hair than I am in the individual strands of hair. I apologize if you can hear Mr. Taco in the background. He found something to bark at, but that's okay. He's a dog. He's got to bark, right? So now we're starting to get a little closer to the effect of hair. Just a few little strands there. And these will be just about the final touches that I'll be applying to this painting. And with that, we have the conclusion of this week's portrait painting demonstration. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope that these videos are helping you out, and I wish you the best in all your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.